And you're welcome along to the football show. Later on, we're going to talk to Brian Kerr. Very happy to say, though, Pat Nevin is with us. It is a Monday evening. Good evening, Pat Nevin. Hello.
Hello, how are you doing, Joe? I can hear you loud and clear.
Excellent, excellent. We have much to talk about. So the league table, as we head towards another international break, has Chelsea top of the heap, 16 points. We have Liverpool on 15. We have Man City and Manchester United on 14. By the way, Everton and Brighton also on 14. So very good starts there. I do remember on the 3rd of January 2019, I went back just to check the date, at the Etihad. It was a game where Aguero and Sané scored for City and Firmino scored for Liverpool. I do remember then thinking this is pretty much the best game in world football at the moment, pretty close to it, and I'd say it's maintained its status with a few exceptions here or there. Obviously Liverpool had a bad year last year, but this was great stuff yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, Liverpool City, when they play at their best, they are phenomenal, and they are two of the best teams that we've seen in English football for, well, football full stop, really, because the quality of players, they are world-class players. They're also both playing exceptionally interesting and exciting types of football. Now and again, I will admit, and I think you will admit as well, most fans would admit, the games haven't been brilliant because it's been a chess match and they've kind of cancelled each other out, but the vast majority of times, it's either A cracker, or B, you understand why it's not, and it's intriguing anyway. But the quality of players on show, and it's the thing that really jumped out to me that game. Lots of things, obviously, lots of good players. But see if there is a weakness anywhere, it'll be found out. Full stop. It's not maybe, it'll be found out. And James Milner, poor lad, getting stuck at right back. If there is a tiny weakness, you are going to get hammered. And it's not, I mean, Milner at his very best could cope. But, it was a tough ask for him. And as we all know, he was lucky to stay in the pitch. He was over covering for the goal, all sorts of things. And that shows you not only the quality of the players, but the game awareness of the players on the pitch, and also the awareness of the coaches. They're looking for weaknesses all the time. And if there is a subtle suggestion of one, they're in there and they're using it.
And to be fair, there was nothing all that subtle about Milner in that position, in that kind of a game. How do you suspect that happens? So during the week, Manchester City might well have anticipated Milner playing there, but of course they couldn't be sure until an hour before kickoff. Is it just a brief word, i.e. let's target Milner, and they all understand instinctively how to do it? How do you think that happens in a game of this level?
No, I know how it happens. I've been here before. You almost just look at each other, give each other a glance on the pitch and just kind of look over, right, we're going there. And you just know if one guy's beating some guy constantly, like just feed him. And the two things, feed him and leave him. Don't feed him and help him. Feed him and leave him. So if you do that, and you isolate, then it's party time. It's almost doesn't need to be said. Having said that, I was watching, it was the first game of the season, it was Man City against Norwich, and I was at that game, and the game hadn't started any more than 20 seconds, and Pep was out shouting and screaming at Jesus, saying, I'm not taking his words out of his mouth, because I couldn't hear the words, but they're along the lines of, the left back can he play, as we would say in Scotland, and just kept on going. And it was a wee bit of a shame because I'd noticed after 2 or 3 minutes because his positional sense was all wrong. So if you see it, there's a coach telling you, there's all the players looking in each other's eyes and catching glimpses, but also if you're 1-on-1 against the guy, and you've got him. Well, you've got him, and it was that obvious. So, but the fact that they were able to manipulate positions, and what should have happened a little bit more is, Milner starts getting dragged all over the place because is he going to go with Grealish this time because he goes wide, or has he got Foden? He's getting dragged all over the place now. So you need somebody just basically sitting in front of him. Of course, that's not what Liverpool do, is it? They don't do that. They don't get their sort of wide attacking players to go and cover in all the time. So that's why that was a serious problem at various points in the game. So it's kind of clever, but in that level, I'd be dead disappointed if he didn't spot it really quickly.
Klopp gave a very interesting explanation afterwards to Sky Sports about why it was such a game of two halves, because the line was out there, I think, in the first half. Liverpool lack energy. They lack energy. And suddenly they have all this energy in the second half. So clearly it's not a case of energy. And as he describes here, there was a hesitancy, maybe is the best way of putting it, about their play and about their pressing of Man City. Have a listen. Don't think we have it. No. Okay. So in a sense, without putting words in his mouth, he was talking about how he felt his defensive line was too passive and they weren't releasing the midfield to go and press City properly, I think, Pat. And, you know, you really need to do that when it's City. And then the second thing was he talked about these long balls they were repeatedly playing towards Mane, and he said I couldn't work, like he didn't actually understand what they were doing or why they were playing those balls. And he said, so second half, it's about really going after them.
Easy thing to say, hard thing to do. I've watched lots of teams playing against Manchester City specifically, and you're caught between a rock and a hard place, because if you go and close them down, it's the easiest thing in the world. It's going to go beyond you. And that's the difficulty with very, very good teams. They have got these two plans. They do want you to set off so you can strangle them with passes and not give you a sniff of the game, or else you push on, and they can go long but generally don't. But what they do is pass through you and leave, you outnumbered when they pass through. So, it's easy for the managers to say afterwards, well, I know what the problem was. Bigger thing is actually knowing how to get a real good handle on how to beat that problem, because, again, I've been at Liverpool games where I've not known why the energy levels haven't looked right, and I've always felt the same thing. Is it because you're going to the well with the same guys too often? And it's sometimes, again, it's really important in football. If you've got 8 or 9 playing at a real level of high tempo pressing, ain't enough.
Yeah.
You only need one just off it. You only need 1 or 2 that won't give either the amount of effort or just haven't got those energy levels at that point in time, or aren't that type of player. The whole thing doesn't work against the very, very best teams. And the one thing you will say about Klopp, he doesn't tend to throw his team under a bus. And if he feels as if there's one player who's not actually doing that to that level, he'll not tell us. He's absolutely not going to tell us. And he probably might even have to watch it again afterwards to know if there was an individual. But it is just really tough. I mean, I watched last week Chelsea try to do that to Man City and try and close them down. They wasted their time. They couldn't get near them, couldn't get a sniff, because they had the wrong types of players to do that, and also a couple of tired players and one injured player. You do that against Manchester City, you haven't got a sniff. So it was, I think, once again, Liverpool got away with that one. I think they're smiling. It's at home, but I think they're smiling.
Okay. We'll have that Klopp audio, so better late than never here, because I'm sure I've butchered what he was trying to say.
I think we could see you obviously weren't right in the first half. Was it a combination of things? Was it, a lacking in energy, or was it...
So first of all, is what you have to say. You play Man City, and Man City with the ball is a proper team. So, but there are obviously, how we saw in the second half, ways to defend it. What you have to do, you have to close down the decisive spaces. For that, you have to step out in specific moments. So what does City want to do? They want to play through the center, first idea. But if the center's closed, they leave the 2 wingers high and wide, pass the ball there. If it's a big switch or just a pass, one situation, score in the box, whatever, these kind of things. We never close. I'm not sure I saw a lot of games where City could pass the balls that easy through the half spaces. So between our winger and 8, it was constantly poof. So what's the reason for that? We were in the last line too passive. We called the midfield line back. So neither Hendo nor Curtis could really step out when needed, when necessary. So we were just passive. They passed the ball through us, they turned, and from there we go. They had chances, clear, but they didn't score from that. But what it gives you is a really bad feeling. This bad feeling leads to not playing football, what we didn't do as well. So then we had these long balls which make absolutely no sense. 1 or 2 of them maybe made sense. All the rest, well, not really. I didn't see the reason for it. And obviously all these things we changed in the second half. Immediately you could see, we set up, we were higher, we were more aggressive in this situation because we felt closer, we felt more compact, so they couldn't play anymore like they wanted. So we were now in the game, we scored wonderful goals with the ball. The message for the football was play the extra pass. We didn't do that in the first half at all. I'm really happy. But the second half, I'm really happy. It's a strong opponent. Do we want to win a game like this? Yes. But we have to admit today, because the game has two halves, the point is completely fine.
So there you are, that's Klopp, as a man to paraphrase. I mean, it's really interesting, there's so much in that. I mean, he is there pretty much putting the blame on the last line, and I presume he is talking about his defence being too passive and calling the midfielders back.
Yes, but it's difficult to do. It's really difficult to do against good players, and they were under a lot of pressure, particularly on their right back area. And what tends to happen there is a psychological thing, is you think, right, okay. I mean, the words I said to you beforehand, that they don't get their wide player to go back and support. They just don't do that as anywhere near as much as a lot of teams would do, because Klopp doesn't want that. But it would be the natural thing for most players to do. So if you're getting pushed a little bit back, or you've got a problem with your right fullback, trust me, your centre backs aren't going to stand in front of him. Yeah. You're not going to go 10 yards higher. You've got to stay level with them. Because if they don't, they're going to leave them even more isolated, and you don't want that as well. It's funny, though, because there's a psychology to it as well. The psychology of, the cop as well. That's a big psychology. You're kicking into that era. That makes a big difference as well. There's the psychology of how you start a game. If you don't start it particularly well. There used to be an old thing. You used to see it years ago. Well, you remember the Wimbledons and all that used to get the ball and just hump it into the corner and then press. They weren't looking to win the ball, just almost like a rugby kick to touch, right? But quite often, a lot of teams would do that at a very good level as well, because the psychology is they're starting the game in their own half, and that's a psychological downer. If you can press them there, you actually might win the first 15 minutes in that first 10 seconds. And that was the thinking. Now, oversimplistic. But if you just push that a little bit further on and say, right, okay, if they are pushed back for 10 or 15 minutes, that becomes where you are. You need a break. That's why people love a big tackle or something like that. But you need something to break what is the norm. And for them, it turned out it had to be half-time. That's what it took. And a couple of words for the manager. And he obviously said the right things. What was intriguing is it really was versions of 4-3-3 against each other. And that was intriguing, because then it becomes just battles of individuals against individuals, and then it's who the best player is on the day, or who's the fittest, or who's up for it on the day.
We didn't get to talk last week, but I did want to ask you, Man City's approach against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge was to press them within an inch of their lives and to keep doing it, and they had great success. And so it's very striking, 7 days on, they don't try and press Liverpool in the same way. Tactically, why did Man City decide not to do that to Liverpool and did do it at Stamford Bridge, do you think?
It's kind of hard to say. Sometimes the players, we say pressed them. I kind of didn't see it as much. I was at the game, and it felt more like, no, we'll just keep the ball. We'll just keep it. And it's back to the Barcelona way of, we'll give it away a couple of times and we'll try that quick 4-second, 10-second press, right? And if we don't get it back, then we'll just filter back a little bit and we'll try and win it again. Thing is, they kept on getting it back in that little press. And I think that was because of who they were playing against. Chelsea on the day, Kante wasn't fit to play, shouldn't have been playing the pitch. And a lot of the other players just looked leggy. Alonso looked leggy. They were against too many players who were miles away from it. And also a team that were trying a new system which they hadn't quite figured out. Chelsea were playing this 3-5-2 or 5-3-2, which they hadn't quite figured out yet, and it wasn't working for them. I would suggest it still isn't quite working for them, not to say that it won't eventually. So that was that. But you play against Liverpool, they're playing their normal shape, they're playing their normal system, they're playing most of their best players, so they know what they're doing. It's a wee bit harder to do it to that level against certain teams. It's not just the club, it's how they are at that moment, as all the foreign managers say.
So at various points, it's been Foden, it's been Sterling, it's been Ferran Torres earlier in the season, it was Grealish. I appreciate Pep Guardiola sees football in near genius level, if not full-on genius level, and yet a part of me is just watching this team, and not least in the first half when they were so dominant, and just thinking, a Kane, a Lewandowski, he was talking recently about looking for a new challenge, Griezmann's moved recently, take your pick. Any of them in there would just make City such a better team. Any striker, like even I'm starting to think Jesus in there, just as a striker. Like, they don't have Gundogan, who's going to score 13 goals again this season. There is a frailty there, I would put it to you. Or am I missing something? I mean, I presume Pep is also watching this performance thinking, yeah, God, we really should have got Kane.
Yes, he knows that. They tried to get Kane. There was a reason for it. It's the reasons that you're talking about. And they absolutely desperately wanted to get him, but they couldn't get him. So you can talk around it as much as we like. And the fact that he now needs to find another way, he will try and find another way. And we know he's done it before. He's played with 3 wee guys up front and it worked an absolute treat. It's absolutely fine. He can do it. It's just that much harder. You tend to find a lot of their goals are absolute crackers, absolute brilliant goals, because they have to be. They're not getting that striker getting the nod-in tap-ins quite the same way. The scruffy ones are the classic centre-forward goals because they haven't got a classic centre-forward. They're not top just now. They are they're a point behind. There's a brilliant fight on between them and Liverpool and possibly Chelsea as well, and 1 or 2 others, you never know. I honestly still feel the same. Had they had Harry Kane, I don't think there would be a fight. I think they would be so far ahead if he'd have stayed fit and fitted in well with that system. He'd have had so many chances. It would been I honestly do think it's a walk in the park for them. So thank goodness for the rest of us. It didn't happen. I'm delighted with.
It's almost made like a fair fight out of the league, in so much as it can be a fair fight with all the money at play. But you do kind of think in hindsight, Guardiola is now on the record as saying he's going to leave the summer after next, so 2023. 2 seasons left with Guardiola. I mean, if it took an extra 30-40 million to get Harry Kane, I appreciate not very good value. Why not just do it? You guarantee yourself the league this season and quite possibly next season, and you have a serious crack at the Champions League, far more so than you currently have. It just has to go down as a massive mistake. I don't get what the 30, 40, 50 million means to that club.
Well, the first thing is, maybe their final offer was 30, 40 more than the original one anyway, which they wanted to do. So it's not 30, 40, maybe it's 60, 70, 80 million more than they thought a player of that age was worth, who was actually getting injured a little bit, to get them that one over the line for that one trophy that they wanted. And it is that. We're talking about the league, but it's not that. It's not the league. It's winning the Champions League. And they think they could have done that with Harry Kane, and that's why they were trying to get him. But and it's a long way down the road. You talk about Pep. He said 2 years, but he also come back a wee bit from that. He stood down a wee bit from that, and it's not written. It cannot be changed. I mean, he's perfectly capable and able to change his mind. If he managed to get, Holland in, next year or the year after, do you think he'd walk away when he had the perfect opportunity with the perfect player then? Probably not. He'd give it one more hit. So, I think a lot of the time strategically as a club, you have to think, okay, we could spend 130 million on a player now. Hey, wait a minute. We might get a better player, younger, for roughly that price in a year's time. Is that worth waiting for? Yeah, probably.
Yeah. This game was lit up by the goals, ultimately. The Mo Salah one, just a joy to watch. It's outrageous, isn't it?
It's interesting because typical me, I watched it back in slow motion a few times, right? Just to see exactly what he's doing, because it goes so quick and you're so involved in the kind of feints and dummies, but kind of need to slow it down and then see how he gets after what each player and who puts himself in a difficult position. And I was chatting to this the other night about somebody, and somebody was asking about my favourite players, and I was saying one of my favourite feelings has always been that, when you've beaten the first player before you get to him, and you're already considering where to position the second player. And us mere mortals did it sometimes during our career, and then you watch your Hazards and your Salahs, and they're like, I get a feeling they were looking 3 players ahead. It was absolutely astonishing. There was one tackle where he dummied one way and complete, just looking foolish. Top world-class defenders looking completely foolish. And then the finish itself, without anything else, the finish is extraordinary. On his swinger, he plays that from that angle with that precision is absolutely extraordinary. But really, how many players in the world in the last 10 years can do that? Honestly, there's even 20 years. There's very, very few. You're talking Messi, you're talking maybe Hazard at a moment, you're talking himself to beat that many players. And I'm moaning on about it's not exactly a dying art, but it's a rarity now because people tend to pass through you and break lines by passing. See, when you see something like that, it rather does gladden the heart. It makes you wonder, why don't others try it? You never know, because you've got to learn how to do those sort of things. But I think a lot of players who maybe are capable of doing that sort of dribbling, they maybe just don't do it anymore because, they play the percentages. And, hurrah to, Mo Salah, to Grealish and all the rest of them, because when they do it, we talk about it and we think about it. And then even somebody that was my job partly, even me, I'll get the joy of actually re-watching it and slowing it down and figuring out what was the best little shimmy and dummy. I'm talking to you just now, my shoulders are moving as I'm thinking about it. It was joyous, and it was, they're all very good goals, but I mean, that was just miraculously good.
No, it was. He's picking a very nice time as he's negotiating his new contract to score 9 and 9 and assist the others. So it's working on all fronts for him. Before the clock comes against us, Manchester United and Everton drew 1-1. This is starting to feel like crunch time for Solskjaer, actually, at the moment. And the moderates, I think, are beginning to turn and to come to the realisation that really, to get to the next level, this could be the problem. The next couple of games, they have Atalanta twice in the Champions League. They will have Liverpool. They will have Man City. They'll have Spurs away and Leicester away. Who knows what form they're in over the next couple of weeks. But Spurs away and Leicester away. The point is there is no gimme there. And that takes them through until the next international window in November. So this feels like it. Ronaldo walking off in the way that he did, he knows that puts pressure on Solskjaer, doesn't he?
Yes, but I wonder if he knows he's doing that, or Ronaldo being Ronaldo, it's just about himself. Everything's just about me, how I feel. Doesn't care about what anyone else is thinking. Now, to be fair, he's had a good impact. He's a really good impact. And I think that word impact is the important thing about him. It's why people say, why did you not start him? Well, yeah, you don't start him because you want him to be fresh. Or why did you start him? Because he doesn't have as much of an impact. And he's stuff whatever way he does it. Now, if
I know. Well, I mean, fresh for Portuguese duty. I mean, that was the kind of crazy thing.
Say that again, sorry, I missed that line.
No, the freshness point. I mean, if they had a huge game next week, you'd say fine. But I mean, Portugal are saying, geez, thanks very much.
Yes, but you need to, again, it's that long-term thing that everyone keeps on talking about when you talk to all the medics at the clubs. Because he's not going for a rest. Portugal will use him harder than probably Manchester United will. They will use him for every second of it. And he will be walking about like Atlas, carrying the team to some degree as well. So they will absolutely squeeze every single ounce that they can out of him. So people do make the mistake of thinking, it's international, but you can have a rest. No, you can't. It's the worst. It's the hardest. And sometimes there's international managers that work you harder than you do at training as well, not knowing your type of body and what you need. So when they take that into consideration, he's not going to break. He's got games coming up.
No, that's true. He is approaching a point, though, Solskjaer, where if you're winning and things are going well, what he's doing with the team looks like a kind of healthy rotation, and it's perfect, and you're giving everybody adequate rest. It's starting to increasingly feel like a man looking for his best team. So I mean, again, at the weekend, it was McTominay, Fred, it was Greenwood, Fernandes, Martial, Cavani up front. Like, none of those are bad players, but you do wonder if he has a best team in mind, and that best team probably haven't played together for 2 or 3 games in a row, and he can't really afford much more of this. I think this is getting serious for him now.
It could be, but rather hilariously, that argument of the best team, I think you summed it up brilliantly there. So, does Thomas Tuchel know his best team? Because he changes it all the time.
I think he does. Though.
He made 5 changes there at the weekend, and he's bringing in Ruben Loftus-Cheek, and he's bringing in Barkley, who would never touch for ages. You could say the same about Pep sometimes. You're not too sure that they're winning.
Neither of whom, Loftus-Cheek or Barkley, and they are interesting cases who we must talk about at some stage, are in his best team. We know Tuchel's best team, bar 1 or maybe 2 changes he might make depending on opposition. Guardiola's tougher to guess, but I think we'd have a decent crack depending on the mood he's in. Admittedly, we know Liverpool's best team, 1 or 2. Manchester United, and what's their style of play? What are they about? Like, this is all fine when you're winning the majority of your matches, but when you're in a bit of a crisis, it just starts to look a bit hapless.
It does. You're absolutely right, because you know what the USP is of all those teams, don't you? The unique selling point of Chelsea is a very specific thing. It was a 3-4-2-1 last season, and it done well for them. And you know what Liverpool's are. We've watched it long enough, and it's not actually changed a massive. It's tweaked here and there, but it's always been the same. City, you know what it is. But you're right. Man United, I'm not sure you are. It's not even the old-fashioned attack. It's completely different now. And you are not sure exactly what it is all the time. But that's actually the norm. That is the norm with most teams, because a lot of teams, they have to adapt all the time. Whereas the first three we mentioned there, I actually do feel they have a very specific thing, which is them, and they stand out. And you could almost ask them to play in any colour strips and you still know which team that was because of how they play. But there's actually not that many that are absolutely like that. And Manchester United, I agree with you. I don't think they absolutely do know, but do you know what? See if there was 10 guys, 11 guys that were playing brilliantly every single week, I think you'd find out quick enough. Problem is, it kind of not happened, has it? And even Bruno and people they're absolutely amazing. They have great times, and then they have this really fallow period. You can't leave them in. So how do you know your best team? You can't keep on playing him if he's not playing well enough. So, but there is a kind of look about this. They're only 2 points off the lead. You know, they're still up there. I mean, they're levelling points with Manchester City. It isn't a disaster. But hey, it could be after this run of games, because you're absolutely right. It's a monster run of games. And I would argue, they could argue that United, to some degree, have had maybe the cushiest of all the top teams in this kind of first part of the season. So maybe it is false. We'll find out if it's false after these next few games. When you play against the very best ones, you will find. I still don't think they're a team that are going to get hammered. They don't look like that. They just look like a team that are not going to be challenging to win the league, but they probably still get top four.
Yeah. You met Chelsea there. Barkley, 27 years old now, Ross Barkley. I still think him as 22. It's just been that kind of a career. And then Ruben Loftus-Cheek as well had an impact. So, I mean, you just forget how strong this Chelsea squad are. You know, like, you forget Ross Barkley's hanging around. You sort of forget Ruben Loftus-Cheek a little bit. And even Timo Werner scored 2 goals, 1 disallowed. So everything's kind of rosy there. They're top of the table.
It looks outwardly rosy. And I'll be honest with you, it's not as rosy as it looks. You're right about the squad. I went down to a game. They played at Bournemouth pre-season, and they played what was their third team. And a lot of them could have got into most teams in the Premier League. It was absolutely ridiculous, the strength and depth they had. What he's actually done is he's a very pragmatic guy, Tuchel, because he wanted rid of Loftus-Cheek at the start of the season. I've no doubt about that. Ross Barkley, had he been sold, he'd have been sold, and no one would have batted an eyelid, and it would have probably suited Tuchel as well. But they weren't. They're still there. He doesn't go in a huff for them. He doesn't do what other managers used to do and tell me run about with the reserves or the under 18s. He thinks, okay, how can I manipulate this situation that I might get something out of you? And I'm massively impressed with them. So they're happy with that. But it's not perfect. If you look closely at Lukaku, the last 2 or 3 games, it's back to the Lukaku that we used to talk about a year ago.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, the weight may not have changed, but the body shape looks back to that body shape again. He's had to go and play in a 2. It doesn't seem to suit him. He doesn't seem to like it as much. But it's almost imperceptible. But when you see him move, he's not moving the same way as he was earlier in the season. And it's one of those classic ones where it's going to be a tough one to do it, but he's going to have to rest him at some point. He really is going to have to rest Lukaku, because everything's kind of going through that sort of area. And he found himself last week where he hadn't rested Jorginho, he hadn't rested Kante, he hadn't rested Kovacic. And even the week before that, Mason Mount had gone. All these players with all that energy all suffered. When you don't rest them, they suffer. And at the moment, he managed to get a wee bit of rest for those other midfielders, but The real question mark, it has hardly been asked yet, but it is Lukaku. And if we can give him a wee rest and he comes back then flying the way as he was at the start of the season, they're a massive danger. But there's little cracks. There's definitely little cracks there, definitely. I don't think all is rosy. I'd say that would be unfair. Because at 1-1, I was at the game against Southampton. At 1-1, 11 against 11, Southampton were the better team. They were the better team at Stamford Bridge, and they looked the more likely to score. Sending off a couple of substitutions, and Chelsea end up 3-1. But I wasn't fooled with it at all. That was a very, very close thing. And by the way, Southampton, they're not bad. They're all right. I keep on looking down this league, and everybody I look at Leeds United, I like them. Yeah. They're a good team. Palace, they're a really good team. There's a hell of a lot of good teams.
Nobody's bad. It's outrageous. We've never had it better. It's so good. I
actually think it could be, in strength and depth, the best I've seen in the Premier League, which is tough news for Norwich. Because if there's anyone that's going to struggle, it's going to be them.
Listen, we're out of time. It has been an amazingly interesting start to the Premier League season. International break now, so we'll chat to you down the line, I'm sure. Pat Nevin, great to have you on. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Pat Nevin with us there. Football on Off the Ball is brought to you by Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sports and Premier Sports. Brian Kerr is on the way next.